Today I'll be talking about Frederick Douglass today. Tell you the history about him. Frederick Douglass was born as Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey. He was born February 1818 and he passed on February 20, 1895. Frederick Douglass was an African American social reformer, orator, writer, and statesman. After escaping from slavery, he became a leader of the abolitionist movement, gaining note for his dazzling oratory and incisive anti-slavery writing. He stood as a living counter-example to slaveholders' arguments that slaves lacked the intellectual capacity to function as independent American citizens. Many Northerners also found it hard to believe that such a great orator had been a slave. Douglass wrote several autobiographies. He described his experiences as a slave in his 1845 autobiography, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, which became a bestseller and influential in supporting abolition, as did the second, My Bondage and My Freedom, in 1855. After the Civil War, Douglass remained an active campaigner against slavery and wrote his last autobiography, Life and Times of Frederick Douglass, first published in 1881 and revised in 1892, 3 years before his death. It covered events through and after the Civil War. Douglass also actively supported women's suffrage and held several public offices. Without his approval, Douglass became the first American nominated for Vice President of the United States as the running mate and vice presidential nominee of Victoria Woodhull on the impracticable, small but far-foreseeing Equal Rights Party ticket. A firm believer in the equality of all people, whether black, female, Native American, or recent immigrant, Douglass famously said, "I would reunite with anybody to do right and with nobody to do wrong." Amen.
Walker was born Sarah Breedlove on December 23, 1867 in Delta, Louisiana. She was one of 6 children. Her parents and elder siblings were slaves on Madison Parish Plantation. Sarah was the first child of her family born to freedom. Her mother died from cholera. Her father remarried and died shortly afterward. She was orphaned at age 7. The age of 14, she married Moses McWilliams. Then 3 years later, she had a daughter named Aaliyah McWilliams. Sarah was only 20 when her husband passed, and Aaliyah was only 2. They moved to St. Louis, where 3 of her brothers lived. She managed to get a job as a washer. She barely made more than $1, but was determined to earn enough money so that Aaliyah would be able to receive a formal education. Her career. Like many women of her era, she experienced scalp disorder and loss of hair because of poor diet, hygiene, and harsh products. Since most Americans lack indoor plumbing, central heating, and electricity, they bathed and washed their hair infrequently. She obtained the knowledge of hair care from her brothers, who were barbers in a barbershop. At the time of 1940, she became a commission agent of selling products for Annie Turnbull Malone. When working with Malone, she adopted her knowledge of hair and products. Sarah moved to Denver to work on her hair products and remarried. She emerged with the name Madam C.J. Walker. Soon she was an independent African-American woman, hairdresser, and retailer of cosmetic creams. In 1960, Madam put her daughter Aaliyah in charge of the mail operations while she and her husband traveled throughout the southern and eastern United States to expand their business. In 1917, she convened her first annual conference of the Madam Walker Beauty Culturists in Philadelphia. While her daughter Aaliyah ran the mail order business from Denver, Madam and her spouse settled in Pittsburgh. In Pittsburgh, they opened Aaliyah a college to train her culturists. In 1910, Walker moved to Indianapolis, where she established her headquarters and built a factory, hair salon, and beauty school to train her sales agents. She later added a laboratory to help with research. Sarah, now known as Madam C.J. Walker, became very successful. Her business market expanded beyond the United States to Cuba, Jamaica, Haiti, Panama, and Costa Rica. She began to teach and train other black women. She also gave lectures on political, economic, and social issues at conventions sponsored by powerful black institutes. Why? I wrote about Madam C.J. Walker to show how a lady barely making a dollar became the world's first woman to become a millionaire off her own business. Death and legacy. Just before her death, she pledged $5,000, which is equivalent to about $65,000 in today's dollars. Madam C.J. Walker died at Villa Leroy on Sunday, May 25, 1919, from complications of hypertension at age 51. At her death, she was considered to be the wealthiest African-American woman in America. She said 2 years before her death in 1997, "I am not a millionaire, but I'm going to be sometime soon."
All right.
Good morning, everybody. Today I am going to be reading about Bass Reeves. Bass Reeves was born July 1838 in Crawford County, Arkansas. Reeves was named after his grandfather, Bass Washington. When Bass Reeves was 8, about 1846, he moved to Grayson County, Texas. George Reeves, his father, was also a slave and legislator. His death in 1882 was from rabies. George Reeves was the Speaker of the House and Texas legislator during the American Civil War. Bass parted company with George Reeves. Bass Reeves fled north into the Indian Territory, now Oklahoma, and lived with the Cherokee Seminole. Later, Reeves moved to Arkansas and farmed near Van Buren. He married Nellie Jenny from Texas. His career. Reeves and his family farmed until 1875, when Isaac Parker was appointed federal judge for Indian Territory. Parker appointed James F. Fagan as U.S. Marshal, directing him to hire 200 deputy U.S. Marshals. Fagan heard about Reeves, who knew the Indian Territory and could speak severe Indian languages. He recruited him as one of his deputies, and Reeves was the first African-American deputy west of the Mississippi River. Reeves was intentionally assigned as the Deputy U.S. Marshal for the Western District of Arkansas, which had responsibility for the Indian Territory. Reeves served in that district until 1893. He worked 32 years as a federal peace officer. Once he had to arrest his own son for murder. Wow. When he retired in 1907, Reeves claimed to have arrested 3,000 felons. He shot and killed 14 outlaws to defend his and others' lives. One of his sons was charged with murder of his wife, Marshall Reeves. Wow. His son was eventually tracked and convicted, captured, and tried. He served his time in Fort Leavenworth in Kansas before being released. When Oklahoma became a state in 1907, Reeves was 68. He became a Muskogee, Oklahoma Police Department. He served for 2 years before he became ill and had to retire. He was himself once charged with murdering a post cook. Wow. His death. Reeves' health began to fail and he died of Bright's disease nephritis in 1910. July 1838 through January 12, 1910, he died when he was 71 years old. Why? I wrote about this to show how a man named Bass Reeves saved lives and how he worked all his life to help others and just not himself. He had to go through a lot of pain with putting his 2 sons in prison for murder and losing his wife. His legacy was that in 2007, the U.S. Route 62 bridge crossing the Arkansas River between Muskogee and Fort Gibson, Oklahoma was named the Bass Reeves Memorial Bridge in his honor.
Good morning. I'm going to be reading about Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks was an African-American civil rights activist, whom the United States Congress called the First Lady of Civil Rights and the mother of the freedom movement. Her birthday was February 4th, and the day she was arrested was December 1st. Have both become Rosa Parks Day, commemorated in both California and Ohio. On December 1st, 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama, Parks refused to obey bus driver James Blake's order to give up a seat in the colored section to a white passenger. After the white section was filled, Rosa Parks acts of defense in the Montgomery bus boycott became important symbols of the modern civil rights movement. She became an international icon of resistance to racial segregation. She organized and collaborated with civil rights leaders, including Edgar Nixon, president of the local chapter of the NAACP, and the Martin Luther King, a new minister in town who gained national prominence in the civil rights movement. And at the time, Parks was secretary of the Montgomery chapter of the NAACP. She had recently attended the Highlander Folk School, a Tennessee Center of Training activists for the workers' rights and racial security. The reason I picked to talk about Rosa Parks is because Rosa Parks played a big role in our bus system today. If it wasn't for her, blacks probably wouldn't be able to sit what they want on the bus today.
Amen.
I will be reading about Maya Angelou. She was born Margaret Annie Johnson. She was born on April 4th, 1928 in St. Louis, Missouri. She was a writer, a civil rights activist. Maya Angelou is known for her 1969 memoir, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. She was an author, actress, screenwriter, dancer, and poet. Born Margaret Ann Johnson, Angelou had a difficult childhood. Her parents split up when she was very young, and she and her older brother Bailey were sent to live with their father's mother. As an African American, Angelou experienced firsthand racial prejudice and discrimination in Arkansas. During a visit with her mother, she was sexually touched by her mother's boyfriend. Angelou's uncles killed her mother's boyfriend. She was traumatized by the experience. Angelou stopped talking. She returned to Arkansas and spent years as a virtual mute. During World War II, Angelou moved to San Francisco, California. She won a scholarship to study dance and acting at the California Labor School. Also, during this time, Angelou became the first black female capable car conductor, a job she held only briefly in San Francisco. In 1944, a 16-year-old Angelou gave birth to her son Guy. A short-lived high school relationship had led to the pregnancy. Angelopoulos, a Greek sailor from whom she took her professional name, a blend of her childhood nickname Maya, and she shortened the version of his surname. In mid-1950s, Angelou's career as a performer had begun to take off. She landed a role in touring production in Porgy and Bess. A member of the Harlem Renaissance Guide and civil rights activist, Angelou organized and started in the musical movement Carpet for Freedom as a benefit for Southern Christian Leadership Conference. She wrote the drama Georgia in 1972, becoming the first African-American woman to have her screenplay produced, and went on to earn a Tony nomination for her role in the play Look Away in 1973. Angelou received several awards throughout her career, including 2 NAACP Image Awards in the Outstanding Literature Work Nonfiction category 2005 and 2009. She died on May 28, 2014. Today I'm talking about Ben Carson. Benjamin Solomon nicknamed Ben Carson, was born September 18, 1951, and is an American author and retired neurosurgeon. He is the first surgeon to successfully separate conjoined twins joined at the head. In 2008, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President George W. Bush after delivering a widely publicized speech at the 2013 National Prayer Breakfast. He became a popular conservative figure in political media for his views on social political issues. He is actively considering declaring his candidacy as a Republican for the 2016 presidential election. Carson was born in Detroit, Michigan, the son of Sonia and Robert Sullivan Carson, a Seventh-day Adventist minister. His parents were both from rural Georgia. A DNA test on television series African American Lives stated that he is of 80% African and 20% European ancestry. When he was 8 years old, his parents divorced, and he and his 10-year-old brother Curtis were raised by their mother. In his book, Gifted Hands, Carson relates that in his youth, he had a violent temper. Once, while in 9th grade, he nearly stabbed a friend during a fight over radio station divorce. Radio station instead of breaking the knife blade. He attended Southwestern High School in Southwest Detroit. When he was excelled into ROTC, he quickly rose in rank and was offered a West Point scholarship. Carson graduated from Yale University. When he majored in psychology, he received his MD from the University of Michigan Medical School. Carson was a professor of neurology, oncology, plastic surgery, and pediatrics. He was once the director of pediatric neurology at Johns Hopkins Hospital. At age 33, he became the youngest major division director in Johns Hopkins history as director of pediatric neurosurgery. He was also co-director of the Johns Hopkins Craniofacial Center. According to Johns Hopkins hospital literature, Dr. Carson focuses on traumatic brain injuries, brain and spinal cord tumors, achondroplasia, neurologic, and congenital disorders, renosis episode, and terminal neurology. He is also interested in maximizing the intellect potential of every child. Carson believes that coordination and three-dimensional reasoning skills made him a gifted surgeon. After medical school, he became a neurosurgery resident at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, starting off as an adult neurosurgeon. Carson became more interested in pediatrics. He believed that with the children, what you see is what you get. They're in the pain, they clearly show up with facial.
19, in Georgia, his older brother Matthew told Jackie to pursue his dream. His brother Matthew won a silver medal in the 200 meter dash just behind Jesse Owens. In 1936, Mr. Robinson served in the Army from 1942 to 1944 and 1946. Jackie broke the color barrier and played for the Brooklyn Dodgers. White called him names, but he did not let them stop him. Mr. Robinson opened the door for all blacks to play major league baseball. This is Black history.
Whites died for black people.
Oh, help us, God.
In the words of James Brown, like I'm proud.
Come on and give the Lord. Come on and give the Lord a hand clap of praise. Come on, y'all can do better than that. Come on, everybody can do a hand clap of praise. Sister Taylor said, whites died for blacks. And this time we're going to open up the doors to the church. This is very important, ladies and gentlemen, because tomorrow might be too late.